Welcome back inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, ladies and gentlemen, for a practice report rapid reaction presented by Byers Auto. That's the 40-year vet Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. The reason I'm so flustered at first is because I was trying to figure out before we started this where to start. The simple answer is I have no clue, because we're talking to multiple players for the first time since the loss to Michigan in the Horseshoe. We only talked to JT Tuimoloau and CJ Stroud after that. It was obviously very emotional. Since then, they've not only gotten their emotions in check, they're now in the college football playoff. They have a second lease on life. They're ready to face Georgia. They're on to Georgia. They're not worried about a potential rematch with Michigan in the title game. The whole 9 yards, actually the whole 53 and a third, Tim. Where do you want to start?
Well, emotions, you can extrapolate that out and it becomes mojo, right? I think they've got, it seems like they've got both of those back. But from a bulletin standpoint, as we reported on late Tuesday night, middle Tuesday afternoon, it doesn't matter what the time was, Trevion Henderson has opted out of playing in the college football playoff to get surgery done on his foot, which was probably a long time coming. And people need to understand about a sprain. A sprain can mean a lot of things, but a sprain means there's a partial, if not a almost full tear of some ligament or a couple of ligaments somewhere. So he's going to get that repaired. Probably he could have played as this went on. He could have played if he'd wanted to in a limited sense, but one little tweak here and there would have probably ended it. But the point I'm getting to here is I was just talking to Mayan Williams after practice or after the interviews, and he feels as close as he's felt to 100% in a long time.
Yeah.
And of course, he was dealing with a banged up ankle and a knee, probably banged a shoulder to a certain extent at one point.
His hand.
In his hand, and he's feeling good about what he's going to be able to contribute to the game against Georgia. So those are a couple of the semi-bulletins to deal with just from a player personnel standpoint. And then, of course, I'll hand it off to Andy on this, and I'm sure he's going to write about it. JT Tuimoloau on that Tuesday after the Michigan game, coming out and feeling compelled to give his fellow players a pep talk because he felt like the Dauber was down, and it was down. His Dauber was down for that matter, because it seemed like their whole season had just imploded, and there was reason to hope, but there was also reason to rejoice in the fact that you're going to get to play another football game regardless. But if you get that wish, which did come true, that you're in the college football playoff, you got to get ready for it. And I'll hand it over to Andy from this point.
Yeah, that seemed like a huge moment for this team. I mean, Tanner McAllister, the safety who transferred in from Oklahoma State, talked about no one really wanted to be there before JT had that moment. And I think that says a lot for a sophomore to come in and make that kind of statement. I know CJ was vocal as well, they said. But just to have leaders on this team stepping up, and they said Ryan Day kind of controlled the narrative too. Let's expect that we're going to get into the college football playoff. But to have guys, outside of the coaching staff that are stepping up and sending that message, I think it's critical. It seemed like they got a lot of work in that week that was treated as the college football playoff preparation week in terms of fundamentals, getting right, self-scout, just getting back on track with good on good. It seemed like that was huge for them, and to have that mindset that was, helped promoted by JT Tuimoloau, I think that's critical for this team, and especially for him as an underclassman leader in the Woody.
Yeah, for sure. And so now that speech is in the books. It's going to, could potentially go down as a legendary speech in Ohio State history if this thing all plays out the way that the Buckeyes are hoping it to. Zach Harrison was very blunt. They're on to Georgia. There's a hilarious moment. I've sounded as dumb as possible where he said, Michigan is in the back of our minds. I said, well, isn't it in the front of your mind since you know that it just happened? And he said, no, we're on to Georgia. And I kind of felt like an idiot. But it was a good moment to know that this team isn't just looking back on the Michigan loss. This team understands that it is on to Georgia. It's not just about the Michigan loss.
I hope they understand it.
There was a lot of talk about being on to Georgia in this building today. There's a lot of talk about what happened against Michigan. It obviously still has a very sour taste in their mouths, but at the same time, they've now got to worry about trying to stop Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett. They've now got to worry about trying to block Jalen Carter. I asked Donovan Jackson the first question he got off the bat. I just asked him, I said, hey, how good is Jalen Carter? And the interview went from there because that's how good Jalen Carter is. You have to ask. So there's a lot to worry about with this Georgia team, and I think the Buckeyes are doing a good job of keeping Michigan in that game at arm's length, but not letting it get much further away than that. Making sure that it's still there, but it's not the only thing they're focusing about. They're not still licking their wounds. They're on to Georgia. They're ready to play for a national championship, Tim.
I'll tell you what, man, I hope it's in the front of their minds. Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. It's undefeated. It just won the Southeastern Conference Championship. This is the real deal. This is the best team they've played. They will have faced this year, including the team that just beat them, in my opinion. So, these guys aren't fools. They understand what's going on. It's hard 2 weeks before a game to be up for a game, because what you really want that is once you get to Atlanta for things to really ramp up. And I think Ryan Day does a pretty good job of that. I mean, we saw that in the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago, the college football playoff win over Clemson. Then they got decimated from a health standpoint, and then got decimated further once the game started from a health standpoint against Alabama. So I wouldn't have called that even a fair fight. But the bottom line is they know what's in front of them, and it's kind of like their Christmas has already come. Their Christmas came when Utah beat the daylights out of Southern California in the second half.
Yeah.
And they understand that. It's like a new lease on life. And they're all looking forward to it. They've got a Heisman Trophy finalist quarterback. Well, so does Georgia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is they're led by a guy who really wants to put his stamp on things, but already has to a certain extent. I'm talking about C.J. Stroud. And then past that defensively, I was talking to Cam Brown. Cornerbacks have to have a short memory, as he says. You got to forget what just happened. But you know what? You got to learn from what just happened. And that's the key. This defense has been grilled. They were schooled the day after. They came out and ran some things and said, all right, this is what went wrong on those 5 breakaway plays for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns, which really cost them that game against Michigan when you boil it all down. And so we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding on December 31st. But this defense feels like it learned some valuable lessons, especially on the backside of the defense. But we're going to find out.
Yeah, and they're going to stay aggressive. That was made clear. Jim Knowles is not going to change his ways. The scheme isn't going to change. They're going to fix what happened. A lot of that was fixable. Just a matter of not executing. Missed assignments was repeated today. Defensively, that was the problem against Michigan. Another thing I wanted to point out is that, a lot of attention's been on Jackson Smith-Njigba after opting out himself and not playing in the college football playoff because of his nagging injury with the hamstring. And a lot of people have been critical of that. C.J. Stroud passionately talked about that today, talked about, defending his teammate, how hard, Jackson has worked at trying to get back to the field. And then same thing with Travion. A lot of criticism I've seen on social media about him opting out as well. And people have, his own teammates come to defense of him as well. And I think it's just important to point out that these guys did play through injuries. Like there was a point where JSN tried to come back. He didn't have to play against Toledo. He didn't have to play against Iowa, even though he didn't play that full game. Same thing with Travion. Didn't have to come back against Maryland or play through any of the games he did post Toledo. And, some of those guys would have they could have just opted out and not played at all. So that's something to remember. And that was certainly conveyed today by their teammates that, hey, they already did more than was maybe asked of them. Other programs, other ways, they might have just called it a season, shut it down, get fully healthy for the next year, or in JSN's case, start looking towards the NFL. So that's something to keep in mind when you look at this team and what they can or can't do. But they've been preparing like this all season. They've had injuries all year. They've needed to win without certain guys. So it's nothing new for this kind
Here's
of
something that's proven every day, though, especially when things like this happen. There are jackasses out there that are going to make comments. I mean, that's just the way it is. And we've talked about this before, Spence. They've played all year without Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yep.
This team got 25 or 30 plays out of Jackson Smith-Njigba, maybe 30, maybe 40. I didn't do the count. My point is, Emeka Egbuka, yes, exactly. But you know what I'm saying. Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, everybody like somebody asked Marvin Harrison Jr. that question. What's it going to be like? Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of pointed out we've played without him all year. Wasn't slamming Jackson, but this team. My big line is this team has moved on. The train has moved on. And now Travion, you never knew how many plays you were going to get out of him. He was giving it the old college try. But sometimes there comes the point where the old college try hurts a little bit too much. He probably could have played if he, maybe. But that's a maybe. the bottom line is it's better off for him for sure, and for this team for next year, for him to get to as close to 100% as he can get again.
Yeah, because March 5th, March 6th, whenever they kick off spring practice, right around the corner.
Yeah.
Hate to say it like that, but for Travion Henderson,
I'd be more worried about August than March 1st.
I know, but you look forward to, can I get back for spring practice?
Yeah.
Tim, I think it was more the old university try, since this is the Ohio State University, for Travion Henderson.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not the cliche.
The bottom line, as you like to say, Tim, is Mayan Williams is healthy.
Yeah.
And Dallin Hayden is healthy, and I'm not going to put words in their mouths, but I think Ryan Day and Tony Alford watched back over that Ohio State-Michigan game, saw that Dallin Hayden wasn't in the game, and said, really? Why wasn't he in the game? Because Ryan Day admitted, Dallin Hayden will be a bigger part of this offense against Georgia than he was against Michigan. Mayan Williams obviously will, because he's going to be healthier. Those two backs are very capable. Even against a front like Georgia's. We talked to Luke Whippler, we talked to Donovan Jackson, Paris Johnson, DeJuan Jones. We talked to 4 of the 5 starters on the offensive line. Still not sure who that 5th starter is going to be. Can Matthew Jones get healthy? We don't know yet. They all agree that they're going to be able to do things against Georgia. They know that they can. They're one of the best offenses in the country. It really helps to have proven running backs back there. Dallin Hayden is now a proven running back. He's not just a freshman anymore. Mayan Williams is more than a proven running back. I asked him if he remembers and looks back on those 4 carries against Clemson. He said, oh yeah, that was kind of an unreal moment and I thought Mayan did a better job today in front of the media than he has all year. He was talking to us a little more than he usually does. So, this
bubbly. He was more bubbly.
Yeah, this rushing attack is not lacking stars. It can still get the job done without Travion Henderson, as it really has for most of the year. Gotten the job done without Travion Henderson. He hasn't been his normal self, only 5.
But like we talked about yesterday, one of the reasons why, and Ryan Day hinted at that, was from a pass protection standpoint, Mayan was limited in that game from physically. We're talking to him. He just didn't have that, for one of no term, that wiggle, because of his ankle. And he's not really a wiggle guy. But Dallin Hayden, you just I think what I got was they felt more confident with Chip Trainum in there, because they were in a come from behind situation in the second half especially, which is when guys would have gotten more carries. So there were all kinds of things that go into that. Sometimes you look back on it when you're a coach or a position coach and go, man, why didn't I have so-and-so in the game there? What were we thinking there? And you go back and, so everybody learns from a loss like that, including, the substitutional players. But I'm just curious, like Matt Jones, I thought Enoch Vimahi played pretty good in that game. I thought Josh Fryer played pretty well in that game. That's a bonus when you've got those guys from a depth standpoint who are much more proven than they were even before. I know Josh Fryer started that whole game and played a whole game earlier in the year. But the bottom line is you've gotten those guys some valuable reps against a reputable number 2, number 3 team in the nation. So there are all these silver linings that they can lean on, I think, in this game, if in fact Matt Jones isn't 100%.
After the Michigan game, the whole team found itself in a position it hadn't been in. They were out of control, their destiny. A lot of guys talked about watching that USC game and where they were. Paris Johnson said he was with his girlfriend. She got super excited afterwards. He was like, well, not so fast. We have to see what TCU does. See if we actually see our logo pop up. Other guys were talking about seeing Bryson Shaw playing for USC and having the bittersweet moment of cheering for Bryson, but then also being angry.
It was crazy because he looked like the best player on USC's defense.
Yeah, right? I think Steele Chambers even said like Bryson was single-handedly fueling this USC first half, and maybe that's exaggerated a little bit, but certainly mixed emotions during that time, and obviously they get the outcome they needed, the help they needed to get in, but now they're the underdog, and it was pointed out by a couple players, like they kind of had this underdog mentality all year, even though they were favored in the spread pretty much every game by a significant amount. They were still coming off the loss against Michigan last year, so the whole year it was this narrative of we are overlooked, we are, and they didn't beat Michigan again, so they still feel like they have that mentality. It's not new. Well, it might be new in the spread. It isn't necessarily a new mindset that they have. But just coming off a loss, I think you do have a different mentality. You're playing angrier, Teron Vincent said.
Yeah, I think Teron Vincent after there, I said, by the way, I said this on TV the other night, it's the Bulldogs versus the underdogs in this game, and that's extremely accurate. And underdogs, when they step into the ring, they do have a chip on their shoulder. And the other, but the other team is the champion, just like in boxing. Come take it from me. That's what it's going to be about.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's weird because we talk about, a second lease on life, and now you get to practice for a national championship. Well, behind me, guys, there's 8 national championship banners hanging right here in this building, 8 of them. You practice in the shadow of national championship banner every time you step on this field. The Big Ten is out of the question, so these Big Ten championship banners don't mean anything at this point. But it's not like you're not practicing for a national championship every single day. So I understand that the switch gets flipped when for a week you think that you're out of it because you lost to Michigan. Then you have to turn the page and now you get to practice for a national championship. Well, since they beat Utah in the Rose Bowl last year, the national championship expectation was placed on this team starting January 1st at 8:30 after the Rose Bowl ended. After Noah Ruggles kick sailed through the upright and they win the Rose Bowl, that began the national championship practice mentality. So, yes, I understand that there was a switch from, we don't think we're going to get in, to now we're in and we get to practice. But spring practice, training camp, all of that was toward playing for a national championship. And really, what a lot of people thought, including myself, if you go back to the Tim May podcast at the beginning of the year, playing for a national championship against Georgia. And so, I think we both picked Ohio State, Georgia in the national championship game. Yeah. Well, here we are. You just get it 8 days early. And so, this has been building toward that the entire year. Now Ohio State finally has a chance to do it, except instead of 8 days between a semifinal and a Georgia game, you get 5 weeks between a terrible loss to Michigan and the Georgia game.
Yeah, and what's funny is I was thinking about that when we were talking to some of the players, because Ryan Day admitted, a week or so ago, you think about that loss to Michigan. Yeah, you think about having another shot at them. But that's more of a distraction, almost, that possibility for the media than it is for these players.
I can't.
I guarantee you, when they watch video of Georgia getting after it with their defensive front, especially their defensive line, and then they watch video of those 2 tight ends they've got, and just the way they want to line up and kind of mash you physically, and then hit you over the top, and then Stetson Bennett sneak out and get a first down, that has got all of their attention. You agree? I mean, if it doesn't,
it's got my attention too.
Yeah, but if it doesn't, then you're not paying attention. I think this team is very much paying attention because they have gotten this new lease on life, and it's not about having a chance to beat Michigan again. It's about winning the national championship, whoever that might be. And I will remind people, Michigan hadn't beaten TCU yet, so.
Yeah, I think they're in a much better spot than, I keep thinking to myself, it feels like mentally this is a better situation than last year where you lose to Michigan. That's what keeps you out of the college football playoff. You end up in the Rose Bowl. You win it, but it's kind of got the asterisks next to it. It seems like in this situation.
Well, the first half, too. The first quarter and a half, it's like they were almost sleepwalking, too.
Like a hangover
and then all of a sudden,
effect.
boom. Yeah.
For sure. But now, in this situation, yes, you lose to Michigan. Yes, that's obviously a concern going forward with that series. But that's not the emphasis right now. Not only were questions not really being asked about that, that's not really what they're thinking about either. And I think that's just a healthier mindset going forward into this game. It's not, I don't think we'll see that hangover effect.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, so going forward, even after this game, I think it's better for next season too, of having this, not a clean slate in a sense, because you did still lose to Michigan, but it's not the same kind of, the whole year is going to be built around the Michigan game. The whole year is going to be built around what happens in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthier.
It is pretty funny, though, because Marvin Harrison Jr. was talking about, their goals here at Ohio State are to win the Big Ten East, win the Big Ten championship, and get into the college football playoff and win that, And 2 of those will not have been fulfilled this year, but they still have the shot at the number 1 goal, which is at Ohio State. The number 1 goal is to win the national championship. Yeah, you beat Michigan a long way. That's gravy. You get go pants. You beat the Big Ten West champion. You get a trophy. But they're after the big one, and they're still in it. And you can just feel it, man. It's just rejuvenation from a spirit standpoint. Like you said, the closeness between emotion and mojo is right there. You can see it, and they've got it back, I think.
Now that I've talked to this team, I was trying to draw comparisons with the 2020 Ohio State team that ended up beating Clemson in the Sugar Bowl. I don't even think I'm drawing comparisons to an Ohio State team. We just talked to these guys. Now all I can think about is that 2017 Alabama team that loses to Auburn by double digits. one of your goals at Alabama is to beat Auburn. You know that.
Yeah.
One of your goals at Alabama is to win the SEC. Well, they didn't beat Auburn. They didn't get to play for an SEC title. Georgia wins the SEC title. Alabama sneaks into the college football playoff, wins the first game in the college football playoff, wins the national title. It's a roundabout way. If the GPS tells you to go this way in 10 minutes, it's going to tell you to go another way in 35 minutes.
Yeah.
You get to the same place, just a really long, weird route to do it. I think Alabama took the weird long route. I think Ohio State, if they're going to win a national title, obviously going to have to take the weird long route, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this team's focus is right now as we wrap things up on the Rapid Reaction presented by Byers Auto.
And this is what we're talking about. You're not going to beat Georgia if you give up 5 plays for 350-something yards and 5 touchdowns. That ain't going to happen.
I agree.
They're just the physical aspect of it. Now they got to take care of business. JT Tuimoloau came out and gave a little talk to the team at exactly the right moment. Okay, but like you said, the proof will be on December 31st. Did you get the message? And this is what's interesting to me is I think all 4 of these teams have had remarkable seasons in their own right. And the idea that now the only one you're going to celebrate is going to be the one that's left standing on January the 9th at SoFi Stadium, when in fact I think Ohio State getting to the college football playoff is such an achievement because it rewarded them for what they had done all the way up to the Michigan game. Agreed? They had put themselves to still be in the position after losing, to still be in the conversation. I think there's something to be said about that from not only a program building standpoint, but by the way you played through the season and stuff. And but now comes the chance for total redemption.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people will remember it that way, just given the one loss that they had. But I agree with what you're saying. The body of work was there, and that's why the committee valued that. You know, if they didn't have that body of work, if they weren't beating teams badly like they did, they wouldn't have gotten in. So that is true for sure. But I think the legacy of this team is going to be how do they perform against Georgia, and can they get that bad taste out of their mouth from the Michigan game? Can they even just being really competitive? You know, obviously they want to win. They want to win a national title. There will be a letdown if they don't win this game, but there will be a lot less of a letdown if it's a close game going into the fourth quarter or at the end of the fourth quarter than if it's a blowout and then there's major questions about this defense, about this coaching staff. Toughness. And then we repeat the cycle we did last year, which is this narrative of fixating on these last 2 games and what went wrong versus hey, that was one of the most competitive games against Georgia, one of the best college football playoff games all time. There's a very different outcome and narrative there. So I think that's going to be the legacy.
Yeah, a lot of questions about legacy today as we finally got to talk to these Buckeyes in the aftermath of the Michigan loss, in the look ahead to the Georgia game. Lettermen Row have full coverage of Ohio State Media Day here in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center as the week goes on. As next week goes on, we get into the Christmas holiday before we head down to Atlanta for Ohio State, Georgia in the Peach Bowl. That's the 40-year vet Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching Rapid Reaction presented by Byers Auto. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is even about to get out of here, wrapping up with the wide receivers on the crazy catching machine,
Monarch machine
that they always are using. So
he doesn't have an NIL with that yet. I have no idea.
Maybe you can broker that deal, Tim.
I know. To work on it with him a while ago.
I've heard rumors about Ohio State and NIL enough this week. I don't think we need to rehash those. I think it's time we get out of here. So again, for Tim, for Andy, I'm Spencer. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Byers for sponsoring the video. We'll see you guys back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center next week for full coverage of Ohio State, Georgia as we inch closer to the Peach Bowl.